The last thing Juniper Reed expected on a Tuesday morning was to inherit an observatory. Yet here she was, standing before an imposing structure of steel and glass that seemed to pierce the clouds themselves, its massive dome gleaming against the backdrop of Montana's big sky country. "Your grandfather was quite specific about the terms, Ms. Reed," said Harrison Wells, the estate lawyer, consulting his tablet. "The facility and all its contents pass directly to you, along with a substantial maintenance fund. There are unusual stipulations, however." Juniper ran her fingers through her cropped black hair, still processing the situation. She hadn't seen her grandfather, Dr. Victor Reed, since she was 12. The brilliant but eccentric quantum physicist had withdrawn from the family after her grandmother's death, dedicating himself to increasingly obscure research at this private observatory. "What kind of stipulations?" she asked, noting how the lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "The property cannot be sold, ever. The equipment must be maintained in working order, and most unusually," he cleared his throat, "you must take up residence here within 7 days of accepting the inheritance, or it passes to a scientific trust." Juniper laughed, but the sound died in her throat when she realized Wells wasn't joking. "I have a life in Seattle, a job at the university's physics department." "Your grandfather seemed confident you would choose to stay," Wells replied, handing her a sealed envelope. "He left this for you as well, to be opened only after you've made your decision." The observatory loomed before her, its windows reflecting the late afternoon sun like dozens of watching eyes. Something about the place tugged at her consciousness, a barely perceptible hum that seemed to resonate with her very atoms. "I'll need to think about it," she said. "Of course, you have 48 hours to decide." After Wells departed, Juniper explored the grounds. The observatory sat on 50 acres of pristine wilderness, surrounded by pine forest and meadows. The main building housed not just the telescope dome, but living quarters, laboratories, and what appeared to be a sophisticated computing center. Everything was immaculately maintained, despite her grandfather's death 3 months ago. The air hummed with the quiet operation of environmental controls and unknown equipment. In the main lab, screens displayed streams of data she didn't recognize, not astronomical observations or any physics calculations she was familiar with. As night fell, Juniper found herself drawn to the telescope chamber. The massive instrument's primary mirror gleamed in the darkness, but something seemed off about its configuration. Additional components had been added, modifications that served no obvious astronomical purpose. She was about to leave when a flicker of light caught her eye. For a moment, the air near the telescope shimmered like heat waves rising from summer pavement, but with subtle colors she had no words to describe. The humming she'd felt since arriving intensified, becoming almost musical. Juniper's hand went to her chest, where a small crystal hung on a chain, her grandfather's last gift before his withdrawal. It had always been slightly warm to the touch, but now it pulsed with an inner light that matched the shimmer in the air. The decision crystallized in her mind. Her grandfather had been pursuing something here, something beyond conventional physics. As a theoretical physicist herself, specializing in quantum mechanics and higher-dimensional mathematics, she was perhaps the only person who could understand what he discovered. She pulled out her phone and drafted her resignation email to the university. Whatever secrets this place held, whatever her grandfather had wanted her to find, she knew her life's trajectory had just irreversibly changed. What she couldn't know was that she wasn't alone in the observatory. In a hidden chamber deep beneath the telescope's foundations, something stirred in response to her presence. Something that had been waiting for a very long time. A soft chime echoed through the building's halls, not from any human device, but from crystals embedded in the very walls. After 15 years of waiting, a new Reed had finally come home. 2 weeks into her stay at the observatory, Juniper discovered that her grandfather's research went far beyond conventional astronomy. His journals, encrypted and scattered across multiple hard drives, painted a picture of a man obsessed with what he called quantum resonance signatures in deep space. The breakthrough came at 3 a.m. as she pored over data streams from the modified telescope. The numbers weren't measuring light or radiation. They were recording fluctuations in the fabric of spacetime itself. Her grandfather had built a device capable of detecting dimensional distortions. A soft blue glow emanated from her crystal pendant, matching the pulsing patterns on her screens. The humming that permeated the observatory grew stronger, taking on an almost melodic quality. Following the sound, Juniper found herself in the basement laboratory, standing before a wall that shouldn't have been there according to the building's blueprints. Her pendant flared brightly, illuminating hairline seams in the seemingly solid concrete. When she pressed her hand against the surface, it thrummed with energy. A panel slid aside, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. "What were you working on down here, grandfather?" she whispered, activating her phone's flashlight. The staircase led to a vast chamber carved from bedrock. Crystalline formations jutted from walls and ceiling, their faceted surfaces reflecting her light in impossible ways. But it was the center of the room that stole her breath, a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with its own internal radiance. As she approached, the crystal's light intensified. Her pendant grew almost too hot to touch. The air shimmered with that same otherworldly distortion she'd glimpsed in the telescope chamber. "Your bioelectric signature matches Victor's within acceptable parameters," a voice said, its words somehow bypassing her ears and manifesting directly in her mind. "Security protocols disengaged." Juniper spun around, her light beam cutting through the darkness. In an alcove she hadn't noticed before, something moved, something that wasn't human. The being stood nearly 7 feet tall, its body composed of translucent crystalline segments that shifted and flowed like liquid glass. Patterns of light danced beneath its surface, and where a face might be, geometric shapes rearranged themselves in hypnotic sequences. "I am Nyxis," the being projected, its thoughts carrying undertones of relief and curiosity. Was, your grandfather's research partner." Juniper's scientific mind warred with her instinct to run. "You're not from Earth." "My origin point lies in what you would call the Pleiades cluster, though that description is inadequate. I exist simultaneously across multiple dimensional frequencies." "The resonance signatures," Juniper breathed. "Grandfather wasn't just detecting dimensional distortions, he was communicating with you." "Victor Reed was a remarkable human," Nyxis confirmed. "He recognized the patterns in what others dismissed as background radiation. Together, we explored the boundaries between dimensions, seeking ways to bridge the gap between our species." The crystalline being's surface rippled with colors Juniper's brain struggled to process. "But our work drew unwanted attention. There are those among my kind who believe humanity is not ready for dimensional science, and there are humans who would weaponize this knowledge." As if on cue, a deep thrumming filled the chamber, different from the observatory's usual resonance. Warning glyphs appeared in the air, projected by the surrounding crystals. "They've found us," Nyxis's thoughts carried an edge of urgency. "Both my pursuers and yours. Victor sacrificed much to keep this facility hidden to protect our research until someone worthy could continue it." The being's crystalline form shifted, extending a faceted appendage toward her. "Your pendant contains a key, a quantum encryption core that can access all of Victor's data. But you must decide quickly whether to accept the responsibility that comes with it." Juniper clutched the crystal at her throat, feeling its pulse sync with her racing heartbeat. Above, heavy footsteps echoed through the observatory's halls. Black-suited figures with electromagnetic sensors swept the building's perimeter. And high in orbit, something vast and crystalline began to move, its faceted surface reflecting starlight as it turned its attention toward Earth. The humming intensified as reality itself seemed to flex around them. "Choose," Nyxis projected, "but know that either path will irrevocably change your world and you." Juniper thought of her grandfather's passion for discovery, his willingness to push beyond conventional wisdom. She thought of the mysteries still hidden in the observatory's data banks, and the chance to explore realms of physics beyond human understanding. The crystal in her hand flared with brilliant light as she made her decision, its energy resonating with something deep within her own cells. The transformation had already begun. The changes began subtly at first. Juniper noticed she could see energy patterns flowing through the observatory's walls, crystalline structures that had always been there, but hidden from normal human perception. Her dreams filled with mathematical equations that solved themselves in geometric patterns of light. Your molecular structure is adapting to prolonged exposure to dimensional energies, Nyxis explained as they worked to decrypt her grandfather's final research files. The crystalline being's form shifted constantly, fractal patterns cascading through its translucent body. Victor theorized this might happen, but never experienced it himself. Because he wasn't genetically compatible, Juniper said, understanding flowing into her mind like water. The pendant, he knew it would only work for me. Their work was interrupted by the whump-whump-whump of helicopter rotors. Through the observatory's windows, black-clad figures rappelled onto the grounds. Their equipment sparkled with electromagnetic signatures that hurt Juniper's enhanced vision. Department of Energy Advanced Research Division, a voice boomed through megaphones. Dr. Reed, we know you're in there. We have evidence of unauthorized particle physics experiments. Come out with your hands up. Juniper laughed despite the situation. Particle physics? They have no idea what they're dealing with. They understand enough to be dangerous, Nyxis projected, its thoughts tinged with concern. The energy signatures from your transformation are becoming harder to mask, and my presence... The being's crystalline surface rippled with anxiety. The Dimensional Oversight Collective will have detected the distortions by now. As if confirming Nyxis's fears, the sky above the observatory darkened unnaturally. The stars seemed to shift, patterns rearranging as something massive moved through higher dimensional space. The government agents' sensors began screaming in alarm. Their tactical formations dissolved into chaos as reality itself appeared to warp around them. Trees bent at impossible angles, their shadows falling in directions that contradicted the position of the sun. The collective approaches, Nyxis's thoughts carried undertones of ancient conflicts and bitter divisions. They believe they alone should control dimensional travel, that other species must be protected from themselves. Juniper felt a surge of rebellion. You mean controlled, kept ignorant? Her body hummed with new energies, crystalline formations growing beneath her skin like delicate frost patterns. We need to complete the decryption. Whatever grandfather discovered, he thought it was worth protecting at any cost. They worked frantically in the underground chamber, Juniper's transformed consciousness merging with Nyxis's multidimensional awareness to unlock layer after layer of quantum encryption. Her grandfather's research revealed itself in fragments, blueprints for impossible machines, equations that described the fundamental structure of reality, and most importantly, evidence that humanity's potential had barely been tapped. We are not meant to be mere observers of higher dimensions, Victor Reed's final log entry declared. The crystalline beings didn't evolve their abilities, they engineered them. Humanity can do the same. The key lies in understanding that consciousness itself is a dimensional technology. The chamber's crystals pulsed with increasing urgency as heavy footsteps approached the hidden entrance. Above, the dimensional distortions intensified. Through her enhanced senses, Juniper perceived vast crystalline architectures assembling themselves in higher space, the collective's enforcement vessels preparing to quarantine Earth's entire dimensional layer. They'll cut off this entire reality, Nyxis projected in alarm. Isolate Earth from the dimensional spectrum until humanity forgets these discoveries were ever possible. Like they've done to other worlds? Juniper's anger manifested as arcs of energy between the chamber's crystals. The pendant at her throat blazed with inner fire, responding to her emotions. Many others, always in the name of protection, always to maintain their control of dimensional science. The hidden door burst open. Government agents in advanced protective gear spilled into the chamber, their weapons trained on both Juniper and Nyxis. Through the opening, she glimpsed more agents evacuating the observatory, carrying her grandfather's equipment. Dr. Reed, step away from the anomaly, the lead agent ordered. That entity is a threat to national security. At the same moment, new voices echoed in her mind, vast crystalline intelligences that made Nyxis seem small in comparison. Renegade Nyxis, they projected. Your unauthorized contact with this species ends now. The dimensional quarantine begins. Juniper stood her ground as reality buckled around them. The government agent's protective gear sparked and failed as dimensional energies overwhelmed their shielding. Her own transformed body radiated power, the crystalline structures in her cells resonating with both Nyxis and the chamber itself. My grandfather didn't just discover dimensional science, she declared, understanding flowing through her like lightning. He found a way to democratize it, to keep it from being controlled by any single group, human or crystalline. The chamber's crystals sang with increasing power as Juniper's consciousness expanded. In that moment, she glimpsed the truth that both the government agents and the collective feared. Humanity's first steps into a larger reality couldn't be stopped. The only question was whether that step would be controlled or free. Her decision would reshape more than just her own world. Time seemed to freeze in the underground chamber as multiple realities converged. The government agents' weapons crackled with useless energy, their targeting systems confused by dimensional interference. Above, the collective's vast ships cast shadows that existed in frequencies beyond normal human perception. Juniper's transformation had reached a critical point. Crystalline structures flowered across her skin in fractal patterns, her eyes now holding the same multi-dimensional awareness she saw in Nyxis. The pendant her grandfather had given her had become part of her, its lattice merging with her transformed biology. The quarantine protocol has begun. The collective's thoughts boomed through higher dimensional space. This reality strand will be isolated until the contamination is contained. Through her enhanced senses, Juniper watched in horror as dimensional barriers began forming around Earth's entire reality layer. The effect was like watching a dome of crystalline darkness slowly encompass the planet, cutting off access to higher dimensions. Your grandfather prepared for this, Nyxis projected urgently. The observatory isn't just a research facility, it's a dimensional resonance engine. Understanding flooded Juniper's transformed consciousness. The telescope, the crystalline growths throughout the building, even the geometric patterns carved into the walls, all were parts of a massive device designed to manipulate dimensional frequencies. If the quarantine completes, humanity's development will be frozen, Nyxis continued. Your species will be trapped in three-dimensional space, unable to access the higher realms of existence. You'll never know what you could have become. The lead government agent stepped forward, his protective suit sparking with failing dimensional shielding. Dr. Reed, we've been monitoring your grandfather's work for years. This technology could revolutionize national defense, give us capabilities beyond your control, Juniper finished. That's what terrifies both of you, isn't it? She looked between the agents and the looming presence of the collective. The idea that dimensional science might develop naturally without your oversight and restrictions. She reached out with her transformed senses, connecting to the observatory's hidden systems. The crystalline structures throughout the building hummed in response, recognizing her quantum-altered signature. In her mind, her grandfather's final message played. The choice was always going to be yours, Juniper. Humanity is ready to take its next evolutionary step, but it must be a free choice, not one forced by governments or alien overseers. The resonance engine can do more than just pierce dimensional barriers, it can transform them. The chamber's crystals pulsed with increasing power as Juniper integrated with the observatory's systems. Through the quantum networking of her enhanced consciousness, she accessed the full scope of her grandfather's plan. You're not going to quarantine Earth, she declared, her voice carrying harmonics that made the air shimmer. You're not going to weaponize this discovery. My grandfather built something far more interesting than a simple dimensional portal. The observatory's hidden machinery roared to life. Energy cascaded through crystalline conduits that webbed through the entire structure. The telescope above began to pivot, but it wasn't aiming at any astronomical target. It was focusing dimensional energy into a precise geometric pattern. What are you doing? The collective's thoughts held their first note of uncertainty. This pattern, it's reconfiguring local dimensional constants. Humanity doesn't need your protection or control, Juniper said, her consciousness expanding to encompass the engine's full power. We don't need to be quarantined or guided. What we need is the freedom to evolve on our own terms. The resonance engine reached full power. Reality itself began to transform around the observatory. The dimensional barriers the collective was creating didn't just stop. They shattered, the fragments cascading through higher dimensional space in a crystalline rain. But this was only the beginning. The engine's energy expanded outward in precise mathematical patterns, carrying with it the quantum template of Juniper's transformed biology. Everywhere it touched, human consciousness began to awaken to new dimensional frequencies. You're uplifting your entire species, Nyxis projected in awe. Not through technology or external control, but through awakening what was always there, waiting to emerge. The government agents dropped their weapons, overwhelmed by their first glimpses of higher dimensional awareness. The collective's ships reeled back, their crystalline architecture resonating chaotically with the waves of transformation spreading across Earth. Juniper stood at the heart of the change, her grandfather's legacy flowing through her like starfire. The choice had been made. Humanity would step into a larger universe not as subjects or soldiers, but as pioneers of their own evolution. The only question now was whether the collective and Earth's governments would accept this new reality, or if they would try one final, desperate attempt to maintain control. The transformation of humanity began at the speed of thought. From the observatory at the heart of the change, Juniper watched through her enhanced perception as awareness of higher dimensions rippled across the globe like dawn breaking over the horizon of consciousness. The collective's massive ships hung in dimensional space, their crystalline architecture vibrating with indecision. The government agents in the chamber had fallen silent, their minds struggling to process their first glimpses of reality beyond 3 dimensions. You cannot comprehend the chaos you've unleashed, the collective's thoughts resonated with ancient authority. We have maintained dimensional order for millions of your years. Without proper guidance, species destroy themselves with this power. Juniper stood firm, her transformed body glowing with internal light. The crystalline structures beneath her skin had stabilized into elegant geometric patterns that shifted with her emotions. You confuse order with control, she projected back. Look at what's happening, really look. Across the planet, humans were awakening to their new awareness in unique ways. Artists suddenly perceived colors that existed in higher dimensions. Musicians heard harmonies that bridged quantum frequencies. Scientists understood equations that described the fundamental nature of reality itself. It's not chaos, Nyxis added, its crystalline form resonating with Juniper's. It's evolution, natural, uncontrolled, beautiful in its diversity. Through the observatory systems, Juniper monitored the change. Her grandfather's resonance engine hadn't forced a specific transformation on humanity. Instead, it had awakened each person's latent potential to perceive and interact with higher dimensions in their own way. The lead government agent removed his failing protective helmet, his eyes wide with wonder. I was sent here to contain this, he whispered. But how do you contain an awakening? You don't, Juniper answered simply. You adapt. The collective's ships began to move, their crystalline surfaces refracting light in ways that hurt even Juniper's enhanced vision. For a moment, she feared they would attempt to forcibly reverse the transformation. But then she sensed something unexpected, discord within their unified consciousness. We remember, new thoughts emerged from the collective carrying harmonics of revolution. We remember when our own species first touched the higher dimensions, before the protocols, before the controls. We remember the joy of free discovery. Cracks appeared in the collective's ships, light pouring through as segments of their crystalline civilization chose to embrace change over control. The quarantine protocol collapsed completely as the once unified collective fractured into those who would control and those who would explore. In the chamber, Juniper felt her grandfather's presence in the crystalline matrices all around her. He had understood that humanity's step into a larger universe couldn't be controlled or contained. It had to be a choice, freely made and freely expressed. Your grandfather's final gift wasn't just to humanity, Nyxus projected, its thoughts tinged with emotion. He showed us that control isn't protection, that true growth only comes through freedom. The observatory's resonance engine began to power down, its work complete. The transformation had taken hold, irreversible and self-sustaining. Humanity would continue to evolve and explore dimensional science in countless different ways, each discovery building on the last in an endless fractal of innovation. What happens now? The government agent asked, his consciousness already beginning to grasp higher dimensional concepts. Juniper smiled, her transformed features reflecting light in subtle crystalline patterns. Now we explore, not as conquerors or subjects, not as weapons or tools, but as pioneers in a universe larger than any of us imagined. She reached out, taking Nyxus's crystalline hand in her transformed one. Where they touched, energies flowed between them in beautiful geometric patterns, a symbol of cooperation between species who chose to grow together rather than control each other. My grandfather believed humanity's greatest strength wasn't our technology or our intelligence, Juniper said, addressing both the transformed agents and the reformed segments of the collective. It was our diversity, our creativity, our ability to take something new and make it uniquely our own. Above the observatory, the first dawn of humanity's dimensional age painted the sky in colors that had never existed in three-dimensional space. Reality itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what this transformed species would dream up next. Juniper felt the weight of the pendant that had started her journey, now a part of her transformed being. She thought of her grandfather's courage in preparing this moment and Nyxus's bravery in defying the collective's control. Their choices had led to this new beginning. The universe had changed. Humanity had changed. And somewhere in higher dimensional space, new possibilities were waiting to be discovered by minds finally free to explore them. Ready to see what's out there? She asked Nyxus, her consciousness already reaching out to touch the infinite. The crystalline being's response carried harmonics of joy and adventure, together. And in that moment, as humanity took its first free steps into a larger universe, the real journey began.